Thank you very much, Sanal, for this very interesting presentation. And we will continue forward with our next speaker. Our next speaker, Michael Nugent. He is chair of Atheists in Ireland, as well as published author. He is promoting atheism, reason, and ethical secularism in Ireland and internationally as well. Up to that, he's also campaigning for the right to assisted dying for terminally or seriously ill people. Please welcome Michael Nugent with the topic Lessons from Ireland on Secularism and Human Rights.
Thank you very much. This has been one of the most interesting conferences that I've been at. Lots of diverse topics and very worthwhile. I'm coming from a country that's not as bad as some of the Islamist and developing world states in terms of religious discrimination, but among the Western liberal democracies, it's one of the worst. To put it in perspective, the kind of strange attitude that Irish Catholicism has with sexuality in Ireland. In the 1970s, the IRA, which is a terrorist organisation in Ireland, used to use condoms as part of the timing mechanisms in their bombs, and some of the IRA members were opposed to using condoms on moral grounds. So we've a particularly strange country. As late as the 1990s, the Virgin megastore. You may be aware of Richard Branson's Virgin brand with the airlines and so on. They had a megastore that was taken to court and fined in Ireland in the 1990s for selling a condom. So it's a very kind of strange country. Now we've moved on considerably in recent decades to the stage that last year we became the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage by a referendum of the people, as opposed to by judicial or parliamentary decisions. So the people have moved on. The people are no longer under the control of the Catholic Church in the way that they used to be. But the Catholic Church still has the laws in place from when it did have control, and that means that we still have serious problems that we raise regularly, Atheist Ireland, both nationally and also internationally at the United Nations and other human rights regulatory bodies. Our main problems are that the Irish state now, after we've peeled away a lot of their political justifications for religious discrimination, are now arguing that they are constitutionally obliged to maintain religious discrimination in order to protect freedom of religion. That's an extraordinary claim to make. Not that they're constitutionally permitted, but that they're constitutionally obliged to do it. And it manifests itself in several ways. One is we have a law against blasphemy, which has been cited by the Organisation of Islamic States at the United Nations as part of what they want implemented internationally. And you kind of know that you're doing something wrong when Pakistan is citing you as best practice for blasphemy laws. We have an education system. I saw yesterday one of the talks was referring to one of the countries here, I think it might have been Sweden, having 7% of children going to faith schools. In Ireland, over 90% of primary schools are run by the Catholic Church, state funded. The state funds the payment of the teachers, the state funds the administration, but it hands over control of the schools to the Catholic Church and gives them exemptions from our equality laws to allow them to discriminate in access, to allow them to discriminate in the curriculum and integrate a religious ethos throughout the entire curriculum, not just the formal religious instruction classes, and also to discriminate against teachers in employment. So we've got a disgraceful situation where the state effectively cedes control of our education system to a religious organisation and then gives that religious organisation exemptions from our equality laws. And we also have two other issues. One is religious oaths for high office. You have to swear a religious oath in order to become president, a judge, prime minister, deputy prime minister, attorney general, chair of the parliament, a whole range of positions. So a conscientious atheist cannot take up any of those high offices in Ireland. Now we're regularly told by religious people, ironically, well, you don't have to mean that part of the oath. And so if you don't have to mean that part, why do you have to mean any of it? You know, I mean, it's very peculiar. It turns out that the atheists are the only people that take the religious oath seriously in Ireland. And our final issue, our final really serious issue is abortion. And again, Nina was talking about abortion in Poland and how restricted the abortion laws are in Poland. In Ireland it's worse. The only way you can get an abortion in Ireland is if there's a direct threat to your life as distinct from your health. And that reached a stage a couple of years ago where a pregnant woman died in an Irish hospital, Savita Halapanova, because they wouldn't perform an abortion until such time as her illness reached the stage that it was a direct threat to her life, and of course at that stage she died. And her husband was told that the reason for that was this is a Catholic country. So it's an outrageous situation. By Western liberal democratic standards, Ireland is an anachronism. Atheist Ireland goes regularly to the United Nations Human Rights Committees when they're questioning Ireland under the various treaties. And the two main UN Human Rights Committees, the UN Human Rights Committee itself, which deals with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the UN Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which deals with that treaty. The chairpersons of both of those committees have strongly condemned Ireland's lack of separation of church and state, and one of them has described it as being due to the religious belief system that has dominated in Ireland and has sought to dominate Ireland over the years. So that's a quick background to where we're coming from in Ireland. But as well as working on those issues in Ireland, we also work with other organisations, other atheist and secular and rationalist organisations internationally, to try to campaign collectively on problems that affect people throughout the world. And so what I'm going to talk about briefly here today is just 5 challenges for atheists and secularists and rationalists in whatever country you are. Now, some of these will be more serious in some parts of the world than others, and in those parts of the world where it's dangerous to do these things, we should stand in solidarity with the people who are courageously doing it in those parts of the world. In Western liberal democracies, where it's more a matter of political lobbying, we should do what we can in our own countries while also supporting those in Islamist states and other dangerous parts of the world. Now, the first challenge that I'm suggesting is that we oppose the silencing word Islamophobia. Now, that's been addressed by numerous speakers here today. What it does is it conflates two things together. It conflates bigotry against Muslims, which is a bad thing, with criticism of Islam, which is a good thing, and which is indeed a necessary thing. And its language, by using the word phobia, implies that those of us who criticise Islam have a mental illness, as opposed to acting rationally and criticising one of the most dangerous ideologies in the world today. Now, I support, obviously, the idea of opposing anti-Muslim bigotry and anti-immigrant bigotry. I think it's important to do those. But criticising Islam is defending Muslims, because the vast majority of people whose human rights are abused by Islamist states are Muslims. And we should give Muslims the respect of treating them as individual people rather than as some sort of monolithic bloc. Most Muslims are just ordinary Sunnis or Shias who just like the rest of us, just want to get on with their lives, want to do whatever their job is, want to have as comfortable a life as possible. But some Muslims, particularly minority Muslims, particularly Ahmadi Muslims, wherever they are, women and dissidents are persecuted by Islamists. And by Islamists, I mean those who lead terrorist states, effectively, oppressive states bordering on terrorist states, and that impose Sharia law by force, mostly on Muslims. So opposing Sharia law is actually defending Muslims rather than being bigoted towards Muslims. And that would range from the sort of Wahhabi regime in Saudi Arabia that considers atheists to be terrorists, and the Shia regime in Iran, where they executed a psychotherapist a couple of years ago for publishing innovative interpretations of the Quran. And then further on from that, you have the actual openly terrorist groups, from the Shia Hezbollah in Lebanon, with its aim of obliterating Israel, to the the Sunni ISIS who kind of who promote their supposed caliphate by murdering concert goers in Paris. I mean, these are terrible people. And then on top of that, you have the people we've heard about who are hacking bloggers and secularists to death in Bangladesh, and in Pakistan you have Asia Bibi, a Christian woman who is facing execution for allegedly blaspheming the Prophet Muhammad for something that was actually a family dispute with neighbours that got out of hand, and two politicians who have spoken out in her favour, one a Muslim and one a Christian, were both murdered. One murdered by his own bodyguard. So it's a shocking situation, and then people will say that Islam is a religion of peace. And if you're asked, is Islam a religion of peace? It's like asking, is a rainbow yellow? I mean, parts of it are, but the rainbow isn't. Islam is like any other religion. It's a religion of contradictions, where some Muslims will find solace and peace in it, and others find oppression and tyranny. But unlike religions in Western liberal democracies, Islam in Islamist states is an integrated system of religious and judicial and political and military ideology all combined together, and you cannot disentangle one or more of those and say that's what Islam is, because what Islamism is all of those combined together. And while the laws of secular democracy in the West have evolved over centuries to gradually reflect more nuanced versions of human rights, the values of Islam and Sharia are shackled to centuries-old Quran and Hadith documents that reflect the values of a more violent and undemocratic era. And whereas we as rationalists can happily say, if we get new evidence, we will change our mind about things, Islamists have to believe that their sacred book is the word of the creator of the universe, and every new thing that they learn has to be crowbarred into being consistent with that, or else it will be rejected. Now, the IHEU publish every year a listing of the countries with the greatest and least religious discrimination against atheists and humanists and secularists. And the most recent one has shown that typically the countries with the best records are secular democracies, which is not surprising. Such as Belgium, Netherlands, Estonia. These are the type of countries that we should be modelling our democracies on in terms of religious freedom. But 4/5 of the countries with the gravest violations are either Islamist states or mostly Islamist. And I've a list of them that I'm not going to read out because it would take too long, but 4/5 of the worst violators of human rights in terms of the very fundamental rights. We're not talking about nuanced discussions. We're talking about freedom of religion, conscience and belief, equality before the law, freedom from discrimination, the right to private and family life. These are very fundamental human rights, and they are mostly violated in Islamist states. So that's essentially the first challenge that I'm suggesting that we give to ourselves is to challenge Islamism and to challenge the silencing word Islamophobia as a distortion of language that is aimed at silencing proper criticism of Islam. The second challenge I think we should set ourselves on a personal level, and particularly online, is to promote robust civil dialogue as opposed to internet rage. There's a tendency, even among supposed rationalists, to dial the rage and the fury up to 11 immediately as the opening gambit on internet discussions, and that's just very harmful. And there are two ways that it typically manifests itself. One is when you have individuals. The most prominent in the atheist community being the American shock blogger P.Z. Myers, who deliberately spread hatred about people that they disagree with, and consciously and knowingly try to increase tension and rage in the internet community. Now, thankfully, his blog network seems to have imploded over the last year, when most of them have started fighting among themselves, which is possibly an inevitable end to that. And thankfully, that group of people don't have the same influence over the atheist and secular community that they used to have a few years ago. But a second way that it manifests itself, and this is probably even more dangerous, is when uncoordinated internet mobs just pick on somebody and attack them incessantly. And a good example of that would be the British scientist Tim Hunt, who made a speech in Seoul that was misinterpreted as being a sexist speech. And a group of people who believed that they were doing good. This is almost like the saying that what it takes for good people to do bad things is religion. Another thing that it can take for good people to do bad things is internet mobs, because people genuinely think that they are promoting something good and opposing something bad. But in the case of Tim Hunt, weeks to months after it happened, painstaking research by the British journalist Louise Mensch showed that it was all based on misinterpretations, and a combination of misinterpretations and things that should not have been misinterpreted. But at that stage, the damage was done. The man had been forced to resign from a number of committees, and his reputation was perhaps irreparably damaged, because a lot of people will be much more familiar with the original criticism, with the analysis that showed that the criticism was incorrect. So I'm going to suggest a few things that we would consider while we're engaging in online dialogue. The first is to remember that not everything you read on the internet is true. So if you read a controversial claim, check the source and then respond based on the most reliable information that you can get. Remember that online debates can intensify hostility when compared to real life conversation. Now just remember that you're dealing with real people, real feelings, and that you're not just dealing with some sort of inanimate ideology. If you're angry, it can be useful to be angry, but don't respond while you're angry. The best time to respond is when you're thinking clearly about what the most useful thing to do is. Don't stereotype people who disagree with us. And as has been mentioned before, if you realise that you're wrong, accept that you're wrong. Say, I apologise, I've got new information, I'm sorry. It can be hard to do when it's on the internet, because what you've said is there forever, essentially. But still, it's the right thing to do, is to recognise when you've done something, made a mistake, to own up to it. Now, none of this is to suggest that we should silence ourselves in criticising things that need to be criticised. It's important that we continue to do that, and in particular, it's important that we push for universities to stop this idea of safe spaces and deplatforming and uninviting people. Universities should be places where your opinions and beliefs are challenged, and they should not be used as ideological playgrounds for closing down discussion. So that's essentially my second challenge, is to promote reasoned but civil, robust dialogue instead of internet rage. My third challenge, and this probably is more to do with those of us who self-identify as atheists than as rationalists, but I think it's very important, is to normalise the use of the word atheism. There's a tendency, and I've even heard it a couple of times over discussions here, for people to think that the word atheist alienates people. And so we should use softer words like humanist or freethinker or whatever, so that we don't alienate people while we're trying to do good things. Now, I think that's a mistake. I think the only way that we will gradually chip away at that prejudice is to be seen to be doing good things while self-identifying as atheists. And if we continually run away from the word, which is at the core of a lot of our beliefs, I mean, at the core of the differences between ourselves and religious people is our belief that we don't get our understandings of reality or our understandings of morality from divine commands or divine revelations. And that's such a significant belief that we shouldn't run away from it. We shouldn't hide from that significant difference of worldview. Now, it was one of the things that we set in Atheist Ireland as one of our priorities, was to normalise the use of the word atheist. We're a young organisation. We were only formed in 2008. But last year alone, in the Irish Parliament, the words atheist and atheism were used as many times as in the 15 years combined before Atheist Ireland was founded. And increasingly it's been used by politicians who have got briefing documents from Atheist Ireland that are introducing secular ideas that we're promoting, rather than being used in a derogatory way, which it typically used to be. We also do things in terms of trying to normalise the word. Like we have a lot of public meetings. We have just regular social brunches for atheists and secularists that don't have a political agenda. It's just like-minded people getting together. We have a free weekly email newsletter called Secular Sunday, which lets people know about all the things that we are doing, and that you don't have to be a member of Atheist Ireland in order to get that. We're just trying to normalise the idea of atheists being normal people doing normal things, and we're happy that is gradually happening. It's now no longer, when we started, if I was doing a radio interview or a television interview, the first 5 minutes of it would be explaining what atheism is. We've moved beyond that stage now. I think that we're now part of the discourse, which is, I mean, it's a low hurdle for effecting change, but you have to get beyond that hurdle in order to start effecting change. The fourth of the 5 areas I want to suggest we should focus on is promoting fundamental human rights as the basis of what we're doing. Now, I've touched on those earlier on, the type of rights that I'm talking about: freedom of religion and belief, freedom from discrimination, equality before the law, the right to private and family life, and most importantly, the right to an effective remedy if your human rights are being breached, because without an effective remedy, then you're not going to get anywhere. Now, the 1948 Universal Declaration on Human Rights is the best basis that we have to do this. It's not perfect, but it's the best approximation that we have to an overview of human rights that we can aspire to. And it is... It stands in really stark contrast to the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, which is the rival declaration that Islamists have put together in order to pretend that they promote human rights. But what that declaration does effectively is it protects Sharia law. And the most important part of that declaration is when they say that everything within it has to be consistent with and has to be interpreted in line with Sharia law. So that is essentially the Islamists trying to pretend to use the language of human rights to instead inflict human rights abuses on people by trying to validate Sharia law. Now, it's also important because we've got to remember that human rights standards are not, like, they're not lofty aspirations. You know, these should be the minimum. These should be the rock bottom minimum foundation that we should have without even having to argue for it. And so that gives us a strong argument politically when we're lobbying for these rights, because we're not lobbying for issues where one group of people think society should be run this way and another group thinks it should be run that way. We're typically arguing for rights that most democratic states have signed treaties saying that they already grant those rights to their citizens, but in practice they're not delivering on them. And so what we do is we go to, whenever the United Nations Human Rights Committees are examining Ireland, we go along, we make submissions, we lobby the members of the committees. We go to the OSCE in Warsaw every year where they have their human rights conferences. We go to the European Union, Council of Europe, and we make submissions to all of these bodies outlining the secular arguments for the changes that we're trying to make, and the human rights arguments. And while the UN Human Rights Council, people have mentioned this earlier on in the conference here, is very flawed in that the UN Human Rights Council is essentially a political body where the states are monitoring each other. The human rights committees are different to that. The human rights committees are independent human rights experts, and our experience of actually interacting with them is that they do act independently and that they do keep on top of issues. And whenever your country is being examined, as they will be every few years, by the United Nations Human Rights Committee under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, I would recommend that you as an organisation find out the timescale for making submissions to that process for your own country. And when your country is being examined by the other countries under the Universal Periodic Review, which Ireland is next month, try to get involved in that as well. So that's my fourth challenge is the whole area of human rights as the foundation of what we should be trying to do. And then when we build on that foundation, we will move on to my fifth challenge, which is promoting ethical secular democracy. And we should each do this. I mean, we should do it as individual citizens, and I think we should also do it within whatever groups that we are organised in. Secularism and secular democracies in particular, they're good for society in three ways. First of all, secularism protects everybody's right to freedom of religion and belief. Secularism is not the same as promoting atheism. Religious states promote religion, atheist states promote atheism, and secular states promote neither. And that's what we're looking for. We would be as opposed to the state promoting atheism as we are to the state promoting religion. The second thing is secularism on a personal level. It allows individuals, if they're religious, to spend their time focusing on whatever they think they're going to do in whatever imaginary afterlife that they think is going to happen. And it leaves the state free to focus on this world. And the state has enough to be doing, dealing with the problems in this world without worrying about what's going to happen in afterlives as well. And the third thing is that secularism combines human rights standards as a foundation stone in order to enable us to build secular democracies, because it's important not just that a state is secular. There are a lot of, or not necessarily a lot, but there are some secular states that are dictatorships, and that's no better than a theocracy. So what we need to be doing is promoting not only secularism, but secular democracy. Now, if you take secular democracies, there's a lot of research that shows that people in secular democracies are happier than people in either non-democracies or non-secular countries. Typically, the Scandinavian, Northern European states are good examples. But in general, secular countries have better social outcomes in a lot of the areas where religion is theoretically supposed to protect people, in terms of homicide rates, juvenile and early adult mortality, STD infection rates, teenage pregnancies, abortion, etc. And if you look at the United States of America, which is essentially one country, but with different states within it, the states within America that are in the Bible Belt have the worst outcomes in those areas than the states that are the more liberal coastal states. There's also studies published by the social scientist Phil Zuckerman and by others that show that atheists and secularists are on average less nationalistic, less ethnocentric, less prejudiced, less racist, less dogmatic, less homophobic, less close-minded, less authoritarian, less likely to see prison as something for punishment and retribution, and more politically tolerant and more supportive of equality in a range of areas. And there is also, in terms of scientific research, there is a pathway to secular rational values. And if you read read up on the World Values Survey website, that's a team of interdisciplinary social scientists around the world who have been studying human values for the last few decades. And what they are concluding is that as individual people move away from survival values towards self-expression values, and that's typically triggered by things like investment in health and education and communications technology, and moves towards democracy and self-perceived control of your own life. That as individual people make that journey, then societies move away from traditional religious values and towards secular rational values. So we can promote ethical secular democracies by promoting those types of pathways. And we should also be insisting that public policy is formed by applying reason to the currently best available evidence, and not by theocratic dictates, and that there is one law for all, evenly enforced, with no role for religious theocratic courts in determining civil matters. We should build alliances with other groups that have similar problems, that are also either discriminated against or persecuted depending on the state that they are in. Atheist Ireland works at the moment on the secular education campaign with the Evangelical Alliance of Ireland and the Ahmadi Muslims in Ireland, because we are three groups who have very different worldviews but who are all discriminated against by the Irish Constitution. So that's essentially it. To summarise those 5 challenges again: oppose the silencing word Islamophobia, promote robust civil dialogue and not internet rage, normalise the use of the word atheism, promote fundamental human rights, and promote ethical secular democracy. And we should do that in our own states if we're lucky enough to be living in Western secular democracy, where you can do that without fear of being killed or hacked to death. And we should also stand in solidarity with those who are doing the more dangerous task of trying to do those things in more dangerous parts of the world. Thank you very much.